We'll start with Professor Rama Kant. Thanks, Ramakanji, for your patience since we are starting a bit late. It must be frustrating when it's online, particularly. Those of us who are here, it's a little easier to adjust. So thanks for joining. And I think you were there for almost all of the previous sessions as well. Thanks for that, and over to you.
Thank you, Suraj. Am I audible? I think if people can raise their hands, I'll know. Okay, good. And maybe you can see the screen. I'm going to share. Thank you, Suraj, for those kind words. Thank you very much. I hope the screen is visible. Is my PPT visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me start without, I hope there are no technical glitches, as we saw some in the morning. I should like to start with a word of thanks and gratitude to Vakkom Moulavi.
Every institution in higher education have to have a certain better standards. So how do we do that, or how we have done that?
There's some noise.
First one, we have done systematic benchmarking. So
can I continue? Am I still audible? Can you raise hands?
Yes,
am I still audible? Okay. So I should first of all thank Vakkom Moulavi Foundation Trust, and in particular Dr. Sajita Bashir, who started all this, involving me, and the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, with which I have had a very long association, and the Center for Development Studies in Trivandrum. And also thank many people in Kerala with whom I have had, because I have been a part of the Kerala educational scenario for a long time. So I should like to thank all of them. I was indeed very fortunate to be able to attend some of the very rich sessions in the morning. I could not, unfortunately, attend all of them, but I very deeply grateful to what Dr. Sajita Bashir said and what Professor Suraj Jacob said, and also parts of what Dr. Anusha Ramanathan said. I could hear that, but after that I had some other meeting, so I had to leave. But very briefly, you see, it contextualizes Kerala for me, and but it also tells me what will be the thrust of my presentation about the shared dimensions of the what we might call the universal or the human and the local, very local. So, for example, it came through very clearly through the presentations that irrespective of the aspirations or social mobility or prestige values that are often associated with English, it was quite clear that students feel far more comfortable in academic encounters and in social encounters to engage in their own languages rather than English. And this, I think one could say even about those who do most of their work in English. And I think this was an important, for me, an important insight, which I already knew, but to be underscored in the context of Kerala by both Dr. Bashir and by Professor Suraj Jacob with a lot of data. But the outcome was this, that, it seems that students would rather take the proficiency test in Malayalam rather than in English. The second point that came through was a recognition of the diversity of languages in the classroom. And through all the presentations I heard, but as always with a regret, that the emphasis is always on bilingualism. The emphasis is always on two languages. I mean, the word multilingualism is mentioned as a token, but the focus is what on earth shall we do with Malayalam and English? Please tell us, what should we do with Malayalam and English? I have always been uncomfortable with these questions and with these perspectives of bilingualism. In fact, even the most recent perspectives that are emerging in academic world, such as, hyperdiversity, translanguaging, hybridity, various kinds of perspectives, code mixing, code switching, you will hear about all those fashionable stuff. They are still very much rooted in the concept of a language, or at best, two languages. That's it, as if there are only two languages. Even if you look at a rather small state like Kerala, you see, there is an obsession with Malayalam and English, as if you don't have a Tamil child, or a Tulu child, or a Kannada child, or a Konkani child, or a Koraga, or a Kurumba, or a Toda, or a Urali child. I mean, the number of languages, I could go on. My very small list of Kerala languages is pretty long. And I am sure for people like you, how can an audience like this, how can the best of the thinkers on education discard the language of even a single student in the classroom? This has always surprised me, and I will return to this in my presentation. The third important point that I gathered from the morning presentations was that the issue of social justice is so fundamental, is so important, which we keep ignoring in our deep-seated desires for curriculum, syllabi, pedagogy, textbooks, materials, teacher education, teacher capacity building. In the sort of paraphernalia of all this, the issue of social justice is mentioned only in a peripheral way. But we all know, particularly in the case of Kerala, we all know that the best happened, even in the case of education, when Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad or such other organizations were very active, because the issue of social justice is privileged. So this will be another of my arguments, that if you privilege the issue of social justice and bring the issues and struggles of social justice to the classroom, I assure you the proficiency levels in education will follow. So this will be another of my argument. So these were three very major gains from the morning and sort of issues from which I could take off. So the thrust of my argument today will be that unless we have, these are things we ignore. In the interest of empirical grounding and in the interest of localness or local issues, we ignore both conceptual clarity, whether it is conceptual clarity about language or about knowledge or about social justice. So these are the three parameters. These are the fundamental sort of, foundational stones of the argument that as if three pillars, I should say. We should have conceptual clarity about these and only then talk of policy and practice. There is no point talking about policy and practices in vacuum. We must ground them in conceptual clarity about language and about knowledge and about social justice. I'm not saying it's easy at all. It's not difficult. If it were easy, then I will be telling you the solutions and not talking about it. There are universal aspects to these things and there are contextual embeddedness. I think they are equally important. My feeling is that those who deal with universal aspects get so lost in them that they ignore contextual embeddedness. And those who are lost in the contextual embeddedness or the localization of a particular program, in terms of needs analysis, situation analysis, they're so worried about outputs and outcomes that they get trapped into Orwell's problem. Orwell's problem is that you have all the information about everything given a particular question. Let us say the price of the price of onions or the price of a shirt. You have all the information in the world, but you will not be able to predict the price the following week or the following day. Okay, that's Orwell's problem, that you have all the information, but you still can't resolve the problem. On the other hand, there is the issue of language, which is characterized by Plato's problem. I should like to clarify here, and I'll be very happy if there are more questions on this, because I have very limited time. You have to just take my word for it that languages cannot be taught. Languages cannot be learned. Languages can only be acquired. So we can only facilitate a rich enough environment for language to be acquired effortlessly. And if you think that the language can be acquired through a, typical empiricist, behaviorist philosophy and psychology, which says, you give a stimulus, you get a response, and you either reward or punish that response, whether it is from Pavlov or Skinner or Thorndike or various other people, this will not help. This has not helped. Plato's problem, exactly as opposed to Orwell's problem, suggests the opposite, that how come it is the case that you are given very little, but you end up knowing a lot. And this is what I'll illustrate to you, that acquisition of language is actually Plato's problem. You get very little input, but you end up with a very complex system and an infinite amount of generative output. Okay. How does that happen? So that is what Plato's problem is. If there are, you can also interrupt me in the middle, but since the time is limited, I think that may not work. But if there is a crucial kind of, lack of communication on my part, failure of communication, please let me know. We should, as I say here, be very deeply worried about the contextual situation, such as, we should know the needs of a particular population and design and implement our program as carefully as possible, and have evaluation and assessment procedures in place. But I think unless we have conceptual clarity about the universal and the local and about language, knowledge, and social justice, I think they remain trivial. I mean, there might be a lot of differences here, but I would like to stick to that position. Very quickly, let me take you to a sort of small journey that this is again something, this is the universal part, that all of us, and I even include myself in certain cases, all of us forget that children come equipped with an enormous potential in terms of their knowledge of languages, of space, of relationships, of social knowledge. They have enormous potential by the age of 4. People ask me, well, what do you mean? How do you say that? So certainly in the case of language, I'm being told something anyway. Certainly in the case of language, there is overwhelming evidence, absolutely overwhelming evidence of Plato's problem. What is that? That there is very limited stimulus, there are impoverished stimulus, but what is acquired is phenomenal. Okay, and I give you very simple examples from the world of sounds, words, and sentences. Okay, I am not trying to put it technically. Consider, for example, those of you who know Hindi, the difference between pal and bal, or those of you who know English, consider the difference between pin and bin. Now, the difference between pal and bal, for example, these are 100% identical words, except the difference between two sounds, both in the case of English and in the case of Hindi. The difference is only between the sounds of pa and ba. Many linguists sitting here would already know all this, but still, others may not. The difference between pa and ba is something which cannot be taught at all. It has to be acquired. The difference is only in the vibration of the vocal cords. And no mother, no child has any access to an MRI machine to find out the vibration of the vocal cords. And there is an exact rate of vibration that has to happen to make that distinction. So that distinction is acquired. Consider, for example, the level of words. At the level of words, you will not find a person in this country and in hundreds of other countries who will produce a word like stick or seat. I am finding it difficult to speak. None of you can pronounce that word. I can predict it. You cannot. And linguists can do all these, games. But on the other hand, for example, what I'm trying to say is that 4 consonantal sounds at the beginning of a word are not allowed. Okay, in thousands of languages. I can say it certainly for the 2,000 languages of India and of English. Okay, it's certainly true that you cannot have 4 consonantal sounds at the beginning of a word before you have a vowel sound. But on the other hand, words like street, structure, spray, script, splash, they are good. They are acceptable. And you have, once you have this, then you can have thousands of words. Now, what is the empirical content of these words? What is the canonical structure that produces these? So, suppose I have to name a new toothpaste, I will name it something like, let us say, Splock. That's acceptable. But I cannot name it as Plussock. No. But new toothpaste like Splock will sell. If I do anything else, I will be bankrupt soon. What is happening here? What has the child acquired? The child knows that only 3 consonantal sounds can appear at the beginning, where the first consonantal sound has to be a s, as you can see above. Street, structure, spray. It cannot be anything else. No way. It cannot be anything else. The second sound has to be either pa or ta or ka. It cannot be anything else. the rule is so well written, it has to be acquired. Participants in my workshops coin the word kapat or patak for this. The C2 cannot be anything else but pataka. You can try these things later after the workshop and have some fun. The third consonantal sound has to be a y, r, l, w. It cannot be anything else. And as you know, in the Devanagari alphabet, y, r, l, w are put together. And there are reasons for that. If anybody is interested, we can do it after the workshop or during the workshop. We can have a separate session on these things if the workshop organizers allow. I'll be happy to spell these things out. Come to the word or level of sentences. I'll give you a very simple example. She is writing a letter. You know, I'm doing this for people who will claim that a child hears something and then makes a pattern and produces more sentences like that. First of all, that never happens. In a newspaper in the morning, when you get not a single sentence is repeated. Every person sitting here utters thousands of sentences during the day, but not a single one of them is repeated. Please tell me if you repeat any sentence during the day. Never. Please try to check that. I mean, leave out the trivial things like good morning, but otherwise. So if you have a sentence like she is writing a letter and you want to make a question out of this, a yes-no question, then there is a simple rule and you will say, is she writing a letter? The rule is simple, that you have 1, 2, that means she is 1 and is 2. So you make 1, 2, 2, 1. So all of us are happy that a rule has been acquired and it works and that's it. But if you go to sentence number 2, that girl is writing a letter and you do 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, the sentence you get is girl that is writing a letter, which is wrong, which is an unacceptable, ungrammatical output. So this time what you have to do is you have to say that 1, 2, 3 becomes 3, 1, 2. Only then you will get the correct sentence, the grammatical sentence, is that girl writing a letter? Now, the point I want to make is that that girl can be made as long as is the distance between let's say, Udaipur and Trivandrum. You can make it that long. You can go on adding clauses to that, something that comes before is. For example, I say that tall and pretty girl. Now that tall and pretty girl with a red shirt and a mango you can make it as long as you want. That, not so pretty girl, but very tall, you can make it as long as you want. But the accurate grammatical output will be that the auxiliary is, the helping verb is, has to jump over the whole thing to get the sentence, is that tall and pretty girl. So 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2 also fails. So the accurate rule is that the auxiliary, the helping verb, or the verb has to switch over the whole constituent. Which means you need to recognize what constitutes a constituent. So I hope you understand this, that it is not enough to say, take the auxiliary in the front. Take the auxiliary into the front to what? To the whole constituent. So I hope, this, I have made my point clear that this is what the child ends up acquiring. Even at the level of discourse, I'll try to be brief, because I lose time. Most children in the Hindi-speaking children acquire the use of tu, tum, aap, which has nothing, only you could do. In English language, you have only you. But in Hindi, you have to acquire tu, tum, aap. And I think in Malayalam also, you have to acquire at least ni and ningle. Ningle, I think, if I'm right, something like that. You have to have the honorific and the non-honorific. You don't have two, I think. You have a two-way distinction. Then we have shared politeness strategies. Let me give you an example. You don't ask, where do you live? In Punjabi, for example, you don't straight away ask somebody, where do you live? It can hurt somebody. Generally, we ask, where do we live? Or in Hindi, certainly, in Punjabi, we say, apna ghar kithe, apna pind keda. The standard sentence is, apna pind keda, which is our village, not which is your village. We use causatives. Very often we use causatives. Causatives means rather than saying, do it, we say, get it done. Rather than saying karna, we say karwana. Now, for example, I know that this room will have to be cleaned by this cleaner who is left behind. I am leaving the office and this person has to do it. But I don't want to hurt him. I want to be polite to him. So I tell him, please get the room cleaned, which simply means you clean the room. You actually want to say clean the room. But instead of saying clean the room, you say, please get the room clean. So similarly, hedging. Instead of making a statement directly, you say, I say, maybe, probably, perhaps, although you know exactly what you are going to say, but you add these hedging devices. So all these things, children acquire, and children also acquire strategies of grammatical cohesion. For example, if there is a expression like that boy wearing a red shirt, then the next time you say he, that he has to stand for the boy wearing a red shirt. The writer knows it, the speaker knows it, and the child acquires this facility, this linguistic competence in her process of socialization without being taught. The point I'm trying to make is that these things cannot be taught. Nobody teaches these things and nobody learns these things. They are acquired. So briefly speaking, can I make this short? How do I make it short? I want to hide thumbnail. Okay. Okay. So what is it that the child has acquired? She has acquired, very briefly, the most fundamental knowledge about language. That is, language, all languages work in terms of constituents, not words. She has also internalized the fact that languages at all levels of their organization, sounds, words, sentences, and discourse are highly rule-governed. I think I have convinced you, I hope I have convinced you, that languages can only be acquired and that languages are extremely complex systems to be acquired. But there are other dimensions of language that child over a period of time acquires and understands. These include inherent linguistic variability and fluidity, that in different, depending on who you are talking to, where you are talking, when you are talking, you bring very fine shades of differences. Where I have to say pin with a British accent, and where I can get away with pin, where I can say, for example, where I can say car park, and where I can say car park, and where I can say car park, and where I can say car park, I mean, these things, you acquire over a period of time because there is enormous linguistic variability and fluidity. And all the time, we are borrowing from other languages. Okay, and no language is an end to itself. We also figure out after a period of time that the society we live in is characterized by dominated and dominating languages. That there are some languages or some cluster of languages which are dominating, handful, maybe one or two. For example, in the case of Kerala, perhaps English and Malayalam, that's it. All the other languages that I mentioned are not privileged. They are dominated. That is why you don't mention them in your own presentations. You don't even mention them because they are dominated. You mention the privileged, dominating languages. So that kind of hierarchy, which leads to the exclusion and oppression and exploitation of other sections of society. We know who are the students who are pushed out of the class. They are not students who can speak Malayalam and English. They are the students who speak other languages. I think this kind of data should be collected. Okay, then languages have inherent linguistic variability, which I illustrated, so I will not go too much into that. And I also explained that languages in different domains of activity. The language of home can be different from that of school, will be different from that of the university, may be different from in the marketplace. So a single person, a single group of people may come up with this multiplicity of languages. So there is no one man, one language association. We therefore say that language is central to the processes of socialization, knowledge acquisition, transmission, and construction, as well as the growth of higher order cognitive abilities. It is also the foundation of critical pedagogy. It takes people, you see, when we were trying to create the BLEd program at Delhi University and trying to create the MLEd program at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, it took me enormous effort on the part of some of us to put it across to people, to philosophers, to educationists, to psychologists, to all kinds of people, how central language is to our existence. Okay, language is to all kinds of systems of knowledge. If there is no language, there is no mathematics, there is no physics, and there is no social sciences, humanities, or literature. Language is that central. Therefore, I have been saying that language is constitutive of our being. This has been my thrust throughout my academic career since the 90s, that language is constitutive, not an additional sort of part of our identity. So, in spite of that, and this is true of all languages, despite repeated demonstration that we have been trying to do, that there is nothing called a dialect, there is nothing called Dehati and Gavaru or Pidgin and Creole, and that all languages are equal so far their system is concerned. So they are unequal in terms of the dominating and dominated multilinguality that I talked about earlier. Yes, they are unequal. But in terms of their linguistic structure, linguistically, if there is democracy, true democracy, it is only in the world of language. Okay, we can only say, the famous proverb that, you can say that dialect is a language if it has its own army and navy. Okay, so it's only money and power that makes dialect a language. Otherwise, there is no difference. So language is consistently used for discrimination and for exclusion in the dominated syndrome to keep students and communities and parents out of the education system and out of the social system. Their voices are diminished. So I have been suggesting that there is a need to conceptualize schools, classrooms as spaces for the analysis of oppression and injustice. Because we keep our classrooms, please listen to this, we keep our schools and classrooms sanitized. And we are happy about this. I am personally very unhappy about this. So we need to think about it. I'm not saying I have a solution, but I'm certainly very unhappy that we sanitize our classrooms so much. No, this cannot be discussed here. BJP and Congress cannot be discussed here. They may be killing us. How shall we then conceptualize language? Now, this is the issue. This is the central issue. The most general and acceptable linguistic definition of language, which is what most of you have come up with and still believe in, is a pairing of a lexicon and a syntax. You take a dictionary.
Sorry to interrupt. This Suraj here. We're getting close to half an hour. Please finish what you're saying. You wanted me to remind you, so sorry to interrupt. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, can I take 2-3 more minutes? Suraj?
Of course, please. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, so I will finish. I just wanted to say that this is important, that how do we conceptualize language? We conceptualize language not in terms of, because this is a very static definition of language. Language has to be conceptualized as multilinguality, synchronically, diachronically, geographically. The point I'm making is that we don't need words like bilingualism, multilingualism, coordinate, compound, or incipient bilingualism. We need the concept of multilinguality, which is conceptualized in the triangular space of innate universal grammar, which I tried to show you, variability and fluidity of linguistic behavior, which I also tried to show you, and persistent concern for social justice. So I think I'll stop there. I had a few more things to say, but I think I'll stop there because I hope I have made my point. But I would like people to go back with this definition of multilinguality, which is constitutive of being human and must be seen in terms of the universal grammar and variability and fluidity of linguistic behavior. Malayalam or English, they have constantly been constituted by other languages. Please try to understand that Malayalam itself is multilinguality. English itself is multilinguality. Hindi is multilinguality. And we are all together in the world that is constituted by multilinguality. So thank you very much. I will stop there. Thanks.